As we've been celebrating 10 years of Centonomy, I'm looking back and trying to map out the journey and figuring out what the lessons have been in these 10 years. And if you watch one of my videos, you will see a comment I made that in my journal 10 years ago, I wrote that I will write a book, and this really is the book. But even in how Centonomy started, some of the lessons that I share in this book was my personal realizations with money. And I'm gonna give you the realization of 200 bob and the realization of 300 bob. It's not a lot of money. So my story is in the book, so you can actually get the book. But just let me read for you something. A big turning point came for me one afternoon when I found myself standing in front of an ATM unable to withdraw the minimum 500 because I only had a balance of 200 in my account. The realization that I was in deep trouble sank in when I seriously considered going into the branch to withdraw my last 200 over the counter. I remember that day like it was yesterday. And I think until then, you know, before I went into business, I'd been working at a bank, earning a comfortable salary. 200 bob is something I'd put in my wallet. By the end of the day, it's not there and I can't quite remember where it was. But that day, I realized the value of 200 shillings. The ATM laughed at me for trying to withdraw it and never realized until then minimum withdrawal was 500 bob, because it didn't cross my mind that I could ever be at a point where I don't have 500 bob. But facing the realization that I needed that 200 bob. It could have bought tomatoes, it could have bought bread, it could have bought milk. All of a sudden in my head started spinning all the things I could do with the 200 shillings if I had it. How many times do we think about the money we have in our M-Pesa account, in our wallet like that? The day you don't have it is the day you realize how valuable it is. 100 bob is valuable. You can do something with 100 bob. That day I learned if I could only withdraw it, I could have done something with 200 bob, because at a point it was like it could have bought milk. So it prompted me to do a couple of calculations about that kind of amount, how when I was not aware, and I think that's why in Centonomy we bring you an awareness. What could I have done with money? And I used to spend 300 shillings, not far from the 200 bob, on lunch every day. So in the midst of, you know, feeling sorry for myself and not having the 200 bob or 300 bob, I did a calculation. And the first was, yes, I used to buy lunch every day when I was working from the company cafeteria, 300 bob. So that was lunch, and you can take a juice or something. And of course, over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, whatever I'll spend will be 300 bob and over. So I did 300 times 30, 9,000 shillings. What? I can pay electricity bill, I can fuel the car, I can buy food for weeks with that. So every day I'm going for lunch without thinking about it. I could carry food from home, but I'm going for lunch without thinking about it, and I'm spending 9,000 bob. But the shocker for me, and what even prompted the way we created the content for Centonomy, was 9,000 bob times 12. That is 108,000 shillings. Now, when you are in the situation where you had 200 bob in the ATM that you could not withdraw, the realization that you've been wasting 108,000 shillings is for death. So I was like, what could I have done with 108,000 shillings? At that time, you know, you've got debt on your credit card. I was like, I could have paid this credit card off instead of doing that minimum every month, because that's all the money I have. Insurance for the car, which at that point I'm struggling with. It's rent for a couple of months, but I think the biggest shock for me was 108,000 shillings is a very good holiday. So this started, you know, things happen, one thing builds on another. So as I started that, and I started talking to people who are realizing the same thing, it prompted the creation of Centonomy 101. And that's why if you've been for our classes or heard about our classes, we approach things from a very practical point of view. It's about where you are now, because I faced exactly what I taught. I went and started teaching. So the biggest lesson in this journey, and we've continued with it as much as we can, is don't ever underestimate the value of small amounts. And just to also put it in also a life lesson, don't ever despise small beginnings, because it's the realization of 200 bob and the value of 300 bob that prompted the creation of the Centonomy 101 program. So if you want the book, I continue with the rest of the story in the book called Making Sense. So I tell you about, my journey with money. I tell you about what I observed as a child. I tell you about the mistakes like the 200 bob I made, even with a couple investments, until the things that I have learned. But it's, again, not only my story. It is a storybook. It's a story of 3 other people who I have had the honor of coaching through the Centonomy 101 program, and it also talks about their journey in the same way and their own realizations. So when you actually do read this book, you will see yourself somewhere. You will laugh, you will learn, you will cry, you will get your own oh my goodness moments. So the book is on sale and details are on the screen. So I hope to hear what your own aha moment about money in your journey has also been. Thank you for staying with us as we continue celebrating 10 years of Centonomy.